Hi, welcome to HoboRec Recording Studios. Time to answer some questions. So we're gonna start off with the questions that came from my Patreon campaign. If you want to be sure to have your questions answered in my monthly Q&As, you can join at patreon.com/HoboRec. There are a few different tiers there. You can join the lowest one and you will be in on the guaranteed answered questions. So the first one is from Henke Grinde. I need a new DIY project. What should I build? Depending on how much DIY experience you have, but I guess you have some since you asked for a new project. For people that are not very experienced, I would recommend starting out with some pedals and then going into building microphones that doesn't cost that much and doesn't involve high voltage electricity. If you have a 500 rack, I would definitely recommend you checking out the stuff from DIY recording equipment. The color modules are really awesome. If you want to start building compressors, you can check it out. If you find any kits for like the SSL bus compressor. I bought a PCB from Serpent Audio, I think they're called. I think they have the component kits too. It's a pretty easy and not too expensive build, and it sounds awesome. Next one is from Sören Sakari. Hi HoboRec, what is your opinion on using samples for drums and IRs for guitars? Sören, Nuclear Plant Studio. Hey Sören, my opinion about samples are a bit twofolded. I actually like samples, they are very useful, but I think that you should learn how to record drums properly and be able to make drum recordings that you are happy with before you start slapping on samples. And I think it's also better if you try to make the drums sound as close to what you want them to sound like and then just use samples for reinforcement. What I usually use samples for is augmenting the room, as if there is a lot of high volume cymbals and stuff like that. It's a bit hard to crank the room mics to make the drum sound really large. Then I usually do some of my own. I record samples from the drum kit that I'm recording at that time. Then I use the samples from the room mics and just crank the room a little bit more. Otherwise than that, it's just the usual. I mean, if there's a drummer that are not 100% consistent on the kick drum, it's just easy to slap a sample on there. And to be honest, if you have to do a ton of trickery with gates and limiters, envelope shapers and stuff like that, I mean, you are turning the original sound a long way from what it's supposed to sound like anyway, so you might as well throw a sample on there and don't have it sound as processed maybe sometimes. I mean, sometimes you can make it sound more natural with a sample on it than just trying to be really surgical with the mixing and try to fix stuff that are not really fixable. So I don't really have a morality problem with using samples. I mean, if it sounds good, it's good. I mean, the only thing I think you should avoid is to use the same samples as everyone else just to make it sound the same as everyone else. The cool thing with samples is that you can actually use it the other way. You can use it to make original sound. And if you want to do that, just go for it. I mean, as long as you have a band that wants you to be creative with sound reinforcement and stuff like that, I mean, it's always a communication with the artist that you are recording. Some bands want to have that super generic modern drum sound, and then that's just what you have to do, throw samples on it to make the client happy. As for IRs, I think that's great too. I mean, I don't see any problem with using IRs instead of real cabinets. I have a lot of IRs that I use every now and then when I get projects to mix. They're really handy, but the backside of it is that you can't really place the microphones and get the tone that you want in the moment. But the same there, you can also combine different IRs and get something really original out of it. So do whatever you have to do. So now we are on the questions from the YouTube comment section. And the first one is from Stian Sundby, and it's from the video I did about planning out your record as if it was a vinyl release. And his question is, what kind of bitrate and hertz should we record on if you want to release on vinyl? I don't think you should overthink it too much. Just do as you usually do. The signal to noise ratio of a vinyl record is a lot worse than what you can achieve with 16-bit. but I would still recommend you record in 24 bits because that's the standard. I usually record most of my stuff in 44.1 or 88.2 for some reason. It's just different from situation to situation. The same there, a vinyl record doesn't really have a frequency spectra that extends beyond 20 Hz to 20,000 Hz, so there's no need to capture supersonic frequencies or something like that. Just do as a good recording that you can do. There are some other parts that you have to consider in the mixing or in the mastering, that you cannot have too much high end, that will just distort. You cannot have panned out low end because that will make the needle jump. The grooves will go into each other. Usually you do everything under 140 Hz in mono, but I mean, even if you don't do that, they will do that at the pressing plant. They will force the signal into mono at the bottom end, but if you want to have control over what that sounds like, you should consider that already when you're mixing or mastering. Next question is from something I can't pronounce. It's QLQNEN. Kulkynen. It's from the podcast interview I was in with the Wilmust podcast, and I was talking there about the 3 most usual mistakes bands make when they come into the studio, and the first mistake was not being prepared enough and don't really have their stuff really well planned out. So sometimes guitar players play different things and they didn't realize before they recorded because they are so focused on what they personally are doing in the rehearsal space. So his question is, any tips for avoiding the first mistake if, let's say, completely hypothetically, your 2 guitarists are too lazy to go over the parts before recording? If they haven't gone through the parts before the recording, they haven't gone through the parts before the recording, so it's inevitable. But what you can do is have a conversation with bands before you start the production and give them tips on stuff like this. Tell them to have the 2 guitar players sit down and go through the song, play it together and see if there's something that collides in their different parts. But if they don't want to do that, if they're too lazy to do that before the recording, I mean, it's unavoidable. Next question from Dark Touchy 1. It's from the same video. So what mic are you using for the interview? I have no clue what they are. They are Sennheiser 541s. It's basically the same as Sennheiser 441s, but they are black instead of gray. At least I think that's the case. If I'm wrong, please correct me in the comments. Last question today is from Christian Padilla. How good are those DPA mics? I'm curious about the 4929 on Toms. Have you tried those, Ulf? There's not much info about DPA mics. The DPA mics are awesome, but I haven't tried them on Toms actually. I've been told that they are good for that, but I'm not sure about the pickup pattern. I'm thinking maybe they are Omni. Let me check. It's not Omni, it's a super cardioid, so it should be perfect on Toms actually. No, I haven't tried it, but I will. This is a good question, so I will probably make a video about this pretty soon. Try those. I have only used them on acoustic instruments like guitars, violins, cellos and stuff like that, and it works super great for that. But yeah, I'm gonna try it out on Toms. So that's it for today. Thank you so much for all the questions. It's really helping me out to make the content for those videos. So if you have any other questions, feel free to leave them here in the comment section. If you want to be super sure to get your question answered, hop over to patreon.com/HoboRec. And see you next week. Bye bye. Cheers!